My name's Kim McKee. I'm a co-investigator within the UK Collaborative Centre for Housing Evidence, and I'm also Head of Housing within the Faculty of Social Science at the University of Stirling. So over the last decade there's been a lot of policy and political interest in generation rent. That's this growing group of young people who are now living in the private rented sector for longer periods of their life, and that is a really important issue. But renting is increasing across all age groups, but we know much less about the experiences of older renters over 35. So we were really interested in trying to find out more about these older age groups and how people experience renting at different points in the life course. So our study involves telephone interviews with renters aged between 35 and 54 living in Scotland and England, and we're particularly interested in the experiences of families with children. I think there are a number of key messages from our study. Firstly, what we found was the experiences of unaffordable renting, poor quality homes and insecure housing are not just experiences facing young people. Our older renters over 35 also had to confront these issues, and this was especially the case for those at the lower end of the income scale. These people who had low paid insecure work were also impacted by welfare reform. All these things really limited their access to housing, and they had to make sometimes quite difficult choices about where they lived and trade-offs between the location and the quality of their properties, with some of them having to share housing, in that middle age group between 35 and 54 as well. Many of our renters felt quite frustrated and disappointed by their situation. The private rented sector wasn't where they wanted to be in the longer term. They wanted to be either homeowners or to access housing in the social rented sector, but they felt their ability to change or transform their situation was quite difficult. And what we also seen was some older renters still relying on family support either to help them meet their housing costs or to access home ownership, and this suggests the bank of mum and dad is still relevant for people when they reach that middle age group as well. It's not just a young person's issue. So the second key issue, I think, is that there also is a number of distinct issues facing people at this stage in their life course. What we saw was that some renters had aged themselves out of a mortgage, and they now face renting in older age on a much more reduced income, and that could be quite challenging. Some of them are also having to live in shared accommodation for longer because of this. They couldn't afford to rent a property on their own. There's also the issue of ageing bodies and how the need for adaptations as people age and they've maybe got health and mobility issues. The private rented sector isn't really that well geared up to deal with that, especially in shared accommodation, so there's challenges around that. And finally, many of our participants talked quite passionately about the impacts on family life because many of them were parents themselves. And there was a number of issues here. Some had encountered discrimination in accessing housing because they had children. Landlords didn't want to let to them. We had some who talked about how it was very difficult to make a home in the private rented sector because of the inability to personalise the property or to keep pets, or because of the insecurity not knowing how long they were going to be able to stay there and put down roots. And because of this, they really worried about how it impacted on their children, their schooling, their wider networks of family support and their kids' friendship networks and things like that. And so because the number of families with children has grown in the private rented sector, this is really a key issue government's got to get to grips with. So our study has a number of implications. Firstly, it addresses an important evidence gap about the views and perspectives and voices of older renters that we don't often hear in research, and it's really important that any policy reforms in the private rented sector recognise the diversity of tenants' experiences, and age is one aspect where there is quite a bit of difference. Our study has real implications for tenancy reform in England, specifically around the no-fault ground for eviction. Many of our tenants talked about the challenges they had in making a home, about the negative impacts on insecurity, and the kind of stress and worry that caused them. Tenants in England, they want safe, secure, affordable homes, but for many that's just not within their reach, so something has to change. Finally, our study also showed the need for education amongst both tenants and landlords about their rights and responsibilities. It was clear that some landlords weren't always aware of the legal obligations or weren't acting on them. And that also underlines the need for better resourced and more effective enforcement action to wipe out poor practice at the bottom end of the sector in particular. But there's also an opportunity here for landlords, for those who are interested in developing that social side of their business, There's opportunities there to try and support tenants who maybe have those additional health and social care needs, and more could be done to try and support these types of landlords as well.